I'll go ahead and get started so we can hopefully try and cover everything. My name's Colin. My dad is Ryan. He was teaching the freeze drying class and then the pint-sized prepper project class. Obviously, I'm here to show you guys a little bit about small engine repair, engine theory. This is going to be a really fundamental class, so if it's going to be pretty bare bones if you already know the inner workings of an internal combustion engine. There might not be a whole lot that I share that you don't already know, but you know, if you're mostly here for the diagnostic end of things, then I would encourage you to stick around. My automotive experience dates back probably 5 years. My dad bought a 1993 GMC Sierra. It was a K2500 with a 6.5 liter turbo diesel engine in it, Detroit diesel. And he decided that that would be his bug out vehicle. So we pretty much at this point have overhauled the whole engine. And I was with him for just about every step of the way. And I learned a lot of really good stuff. And that's kind of what got me into it. That's where my interest started, because that was, like I said, 5 years ago now. And I went on as a junior in high school to enroll in a 2-year vocational program for medium and heavy-duty diesel technology. So that, I mean, you can't learn a whole lot in 2 years, especially when it's just an elective in high school. But one of the things that they really pushed on us were, the fundamental systems like your cooling systems, your lubrication systems, your fuel systems, and that sort of thing. But they really made sure to delve into the safety side of things, because that truly is, aside from the job that you're doing, it should be your number one priority. And I've come to find that that's probably one of the most valuable parts of this presentation, because it's all the more dangerous to be working on one of these pieces of equipment, no matter how big or small it is, to be by yourself, as opposed to being in a shop where everyone else is kind of familiar with the same hazards in the shop and that surround the task at hand. So I like to make sure to share that with everyone that I have the honor of teaching. So basically, the way I kind of like to outline this class, I've taught this presentation 4 times, and what I've found is that there are 2 types of people who come and sit through this class, and one of them are seeking specific information about something that they happen to be working on, and then the other one is just looking for general information. And you might be kind of some hybrid of the 2. But how that helps me is I can really hopefully tailor to everyone's needs as we go along. And I'm really pretty flexible. At the end of the day, this is going to be in bits and pieces, and hopefully that'll kind of help to help visualize and get an idea of what's going on inside this little guy, and pretty much inside of every internal combustion engine, whether it's a gasoline or a diesel or a propane. So I want to talk, like I said, a little bit about safety. I want to talk about the principles and the systems behind working on stuff yourself, the different components, which is probably the most interesting part, because you can actually hold some of this stuff. And then probably what you're most interested in is the diagnostic, the repair side. So without any further ado, do you guys have any questions with what I've shared so far? Nope. Good to go. Alrighty. Cool. I like it. So I'm going to try and kind of get through the safety side of things, even though it's boring. I think it's, like I said, probably one of the most important parts. And there's 5 things that I like to touch on, and the first of the 5 is the occupational side, or not the occupational, the the operational side of things. So every piece of equipment has its own application. This, you can probably tell what this is, right? It's a trimmer. This little guy spins, and that's what turns your trimmer head. So it has its own application. A mower has its own application. A rototiller, a sod cutter, a chainsaw, they all have their own application. And what I've noticed is once we start getting into this here, we forget what's going on over here, or what's going on over here, or over here, that's attached or powered by this thing. So for example, this was not that long ago, this was probably a couple months ago. I was working on a steel trimmer, and I just put a new carburetor on it, and it was on the workbench. I put the carburetor on it, got it all buttoned up and ready to roll. I pulled it, fired up, still on the bench, and full throttle, and here I am knocking a can of brake cleaner over that was on my bench. And thankfully, there wasn't someone else on the other end of that. And that's whether it's yourself or someone else, or an open container that could have got spilled. Especially when it comes to rotary machines, they're dangerous. I mean, you can get pulled in, and I think it's really important not to forget about that awareness and that consciousness of what we're actually doing here. Uh-oh, we're having fun. So I just think it's important to just touch on that side of things and make sure that we're being mindful when we don't, that we don't get that tunnel vision. PPE would be the next point that I like to make. These are my favorite. They are just the standard 3M disposable safety glasses. They claim to be scratch resistant, and they are to a point. But once you start wearing them, and you wear them for probably 4 or 5 weeks, it's kind of hard to see through them. But they're so light, and when they're new, they're so clear that you forget that you're even wearing them. And it's for $4 a piece. It is worth every penny just to take a couple seconds and put it on your face and protect your eyes, because the last thing you want to do is have to replace one of them or wear an eye patch or whatever, because you got chemicals in your eyes, or you got a piece of debris in your eyes and you've scratched it or burned it beyond repair. So great small piece of equipment. PPE stands for personal protective equipment. I might have already mentioned that, but so you've got your eyeglasses, your gloves. These are my nitrile gloves. I bought them for like $10 at Walmart, and I personally, even though they're disposable, reuse them if they're not missing fingers, because for changing oil or just doing something a little dirty under the hood, they work great. So especially if you're getting the decently thick ones with the grippies on them, I like those. And it seems like if you get a bigger mill, they last a little longer. You can reuse them. So I would recommend going with something like that, and you can keep it in your car, in your trunk or whatever. And I also keep a pair of safety glasses in my car as well. And then if you want to go a step further, you can get a decent pair of footwear to protect your feet, because again, a lot of these pieces of equipment can get heavy. If you're manhandling a big sod cutter, or even if you're jacking something up, you want to be able to protect your feet, and you definitely don't want to cut yourself because you drop something on your foot or whatever, break your toe. They don't have to be safety or steel toe like these ones. They don't have to be oil slip resistant, but just please, for the love of God, don't wear flip-flops when you're working on your mowers and your weed whackers or whatever it is that you're working on. At the very least, tennis shoes, you can get away with them, but you don't want to ruin your good tennis shoes. So that's pretty much all I have as far as the personal protective equipment. I kind of talked about safety consciousness and failure points, where things can go wrong. The last thing that I really want to make sure that I drive home is if you are to the point where you're jacking and lifting, you're probably pretty aware of the hazards that come with that. There's that's a whole nother world. But if you are lifting pieces of equipment off the ground, it's really, really important that you're aware of your surroundings. You're aware of where your placement is in correlation with that machine, because you don't want to be under anything that is supported hydraulically. You want to make sure if you're lifting something up with a jack, you put something to support it underneath. And what I've noticed when it comes to small engines is they're usually on weird, they're usually on something that is not easy to support. It's not like a car where you got 4 sure points to support it. If you're working on 4-wheelers or riding mowers or a dirt bike or whatever, you got to make sure you have a decent place to lift it up and support it. And once it is in the air and supported on those lifts or those jack stands, give it a good push. That's a practice that I do to this day. I learned it when I was in school, and I do it every time I have something in the air. After I support it, I put my whole body weight on it just to make sure, because if I'm going underneath it for whatever reason, there's a good chance I'm going to be taking a bolt off or pulling an oil filter or whatever, and if I have to put my whole body weight on it, then I want to know that it can support my whole body weight without shifting. So just make really sure that it's secure on whatever it is that you're supporting it on. That's definitely probably the most important thing, because that can be a matter of life and death, if not something that can change your life forever. I'll share a quick story of when I was a senior at this 2-year vocational program, my instructor came in one morning and he said that I must have been an old coworker or something like that. Somebody he knew from Caterpillar Modern Machinery was working on a piece of equipment, a large piece of diesel equipment, excavator or dozer or something with a cab on it. And a lot of these machines, you got to lift the whole cab up to get to the hydraulics underneath, because all your hydraulic controls are inside the cab, so they all go right underneath it. And so he lifted the cab up, and he must have just been doing something quick, because he only needed 4 inches to get his arm in there to tighten a bolt or plug something in, and the whole thing came down and crushed both of his arms, just like that. And it's heavy enough to pretty much break every bone in your body, and that's what happened to him. And it would have taken 30 seconds to put 2 2x2s under there to support it, and lower it down. But tragically, that stuff happens, and it happens when you become complacent and you get comfortable. So it's important to be careful when you're starting out, but also be careful when you get proficient about it. Unfortunately for a man like him in his position, he could never do what he does for a living anymore. After recovery, there's just no way. So going from turning wrenches to being on a keyboard all day, that's tough. That's really tough. Please, I know that was a kind of a dark and unfortunate note to end on, but I think it's important because that's the reality of the situation when you start working on stuff yourself, especially when you're a lot more isolated. If you're working on your property, you might only have 1 or 2 neighbors, and are they going to hear your screams from your garage? I don't know. I mean, there's a chance, but you just want to make sure that you don't put yourself in that situation. That is the last of the boring stuff. So now I want to dive into a little bit of the principles surrounding working on your equipment on your own. There's obviously a really prominent factor of saving money, right? Because I'm sure that each one of us has taken a piece of equipment into the shop and they've quoted you maybe $500 for something that you maybe probably could have done yourself, that kind of thing. And shop labor is getting really expensive, so there's definitely a money saving factor to it. And on that note, shops can sometimes be hard to trust if you don't know who is working on the equipment. So, it's one thing to save money, right, doing stuff yourself, but it's another thing to know that you're going to be doing it right and you can take the time to do it thoroughly, because you aren't working or fixing this piece of equipment to make money. You know, you're not working on it to get the next one in so that you can make more money. You can take your time and be thorough and know that you did a good job. So there's a peace of mind that comes with working on stuff yourself. And that's, for me, that's a huge motivating and preliminary factor when it comes to working on pieces of equipment yourself. And sometimes it's good to know when to surrender, when to be like, hey, this is way over my head, especially when it gets into the electronic side of things, because that can be a little bit daunting, especially with the newer equipment. But what I like to encourage people to do is understand that at the end of the day, it all comes down to 3 things. And we'll get into what those 3 things are. But underneath that blanket of technological advancements that are on our new pieces of machinery, there's a very simple principle, there's a very simple concept when it comes to engines. So, understanding how something works is vital. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's what matters most. And if you don't understand how something works, it's kind of like it's the type of thing where you wonder if it's going to be worth looking into to the point where you can fix it yourself, or if you're going to take it to the professionals. But for little things like, oh, my engine won't start, what might be going on, I would hope to be able to share a little bit about some common failure points and some just some things to check so that we can get into it. So when it comes to an internal combustion engine, there are 3 main factors that play huge parts in how it works, and ultimately at the end of the day, once you get your engine started, those 3 things, it's all cyclical, and the whole engine works on its own, right? Because once you start it, you don't have to do anything. The only thing you have to do is pull the trigger and hope it goes, right? So I think what a lot of people generally forget is that an internal combustion engine is powered by combustion, and combustion is powered by what? I mean, what are the 3 principles of combustion? Anybody got an idea?
Air, fuel, spark.
Yep, air, fuel, and ignition. Yep, that's exactly right. And depending on what you're working on, there's different types of ignition and obviously different types of fuel. But when it comes down to those 3 things, you got your oxygen, you got your fuel, whether that be gasoline, petrol, propane, or diesel, and then you got your ignition. Now, in propane and gasoline engines, you've got a spark plug. In diesel engines, you've got compression, and that is ultimately what ignites your mixture of air and fuel. Now the thing is, it's got to be the perfect mixture of the 3. You can have too much air or not enough air, or too much fuel or not enough fuel, or too much spark or not enough spark. And the hard part is trying to figure out exactly how much it needs, how much it's engineered to have. And I would encourage you to do your research when it comes to trying to diagnose what's going on, because if you've got the wrong spark plug in there, or if you've got the wrong gap on the spark plug, things aren't going to run the way that they're designed to. Or if you throw an aftermarket carburetor on there that doesn't work the way it's supposed to, things are not going to run the way you would like them to, or the way that they were engineered to. And at the end of the day, if you're running something that isn't running to its optimal performance based on how it was engineered, you're going to end up wearing down your engine. You're going to end up wearing down whatever the application may be, if it's a trimmer or whatever. So we know that we need those 3 things. You need a perfect mixture of oxygen, fuel, and some kind of ignition for the 2. But for a small engine like this, how that works for most small engines, until you get into electronic fuel injection, you've got a few simple components that I'll see. The thing is, I like to try and show you guys how it works before I tear it apart, because sometimes it can be hard to visualize everything as it falls into pieces. So what I just did is I took off you know, the little door here for my air box, and I took out the air filter. And if your air filter looks like this, I would consider cleaning it. You can, I mean, it'll work, but if you soak it in some gasoline or air filter cleaner, or just buy a new piece of foam, if you can find one at your dealership, get a new one, because what you feed your engine is what you're going to get out when it comes to air, fuel, and obviously ignition. But mostly the air and fuel, they both need to be clean in order to burn clean, in order to give you that optimum performance that I was talking about. So that's a great first place to start when it comes to diagnostics. But for the sake of how it functions, you've got your air filter and your air box here, and you've got this little shiny part with the little bubble on top is the carburetor. Now the carburetor works by basically drawing air from the outside in through the carburetor, where it mixes fuel in with that air that you just drew in, and it feeds it directly into the engine, right? Now it does this through a very intricate path of every carburetor is a little different, but inside there are a bunch of little passages that the fuel passes through. And once you get it started, and usually you start it by suffocating it, because closing off that air allows you, by pressing this purge bubble, to draw draw fuel in and purge the air out of the carburetor. Because once it sits, eventually the air will replace the fuel that's inside the carburetor. So when you first start it, give it a cold start. You close off the choke, there is what they call that. That's a butterfly valve on the outside of the carburetor. You close that off, and then you give this 2 or 3 pumps, or however many it needs to purge all that air out. And then you fire it up. And while it's together, I'm actually able to show you that when I turn this, it starts to turn that. Oh, I'm shaking the table. I don't know if I can do this by hand, but I think you guys get the idea. So that's kind of how this all plays out when it's together, right? So you've got air coming in, it's mixing with the fuel from the fuel tank inside the carburetor, and it's going in directly into the engine block. And I'll show you guys, or the combustion chamber, I'll show you kind of what that looks like as we get it apart. But another thing that I want to show you, and I've got to show you it now while I can turn it over. Otherwise, actually, this might be by hand. Sweet. When it comes to diagnosing these engines, a great place to start is, like I said, the air filter. But the second great place to start is to pull the spark plug out, which is just in the top of the engine. You pull this boot off, right? And then you can unscrew it. And then I would encourage you can get a special tool to do this, but if you just take it and put the spark plug back on the boot and connect it in a spot where you can see this little gap here, if you turn it over, you'll see the spark jump across the spark plug. And that's a great way to tell if you're getting the spark that you need. The way the spark plug works is it works under the principle of electromagnetism. So there's a magnet inside this flywheel here. I mean, you can't see it. You'll see it when I get it apart. But as it turns, it creates an electromagnetic field, and it shoots that electricity up through this boot and then through the spark plug, and then once it's grounded, it'll jump across that spark. And it does it really, really fast. I mean, fast enough to ignite that combustion chamber thousands of times a second, pretty much. So if you unscrew it and put it back in there, and then you just crank it over, and it's really easy to turn over once you take that spark plug out, because you're not compressing air. So if you would like, you can come over and see it jump across. Is anybody interested?
Just hold the spark plug. You'll know if it's good.
Yep. Yep.
I've done that before.
So I got it tucked in here.
Oh yeah.
You see it there? It's hard to see in the daylight, but if you've got your hand, just cover it, or if you're under the hood, it's a lot easier to see, or whatever. So We've got our air filter and our spark plug, two great places to start. But now that, I've kind of gotten this far, I don't really need it together for anything else, I don't think. So I'm going to take the rest of this air box off, which again is just attached to your carburetor so that your carburetor can mix that air and fuel. And the way this works is those two bolts are the only thing holding this air box and this carburetor on. And so I just pulled the carburetor off, and if you look inside the carburetor, there's obviously this one on the outside to choke it out, but there's another one on the inside, which is your throttle. So as you open up this throttle, or this butterfly valve, as you pull your trigger, it's going to open this butterfly valve, and it's going to allow more air and fuel into your engine, and it'll end up running a little bit faster. And then eventually you'll get to full throttle, and then you'll be really cooking. So, and that's just on spring tension, so that when you let go of the trigger, it goes to an idle. So, kind of see how that works. And then it's a little easier once you got so that's just. It'll just snap back down like that.
At idle, it's closed?
Yep, at idle, it's closed, but not all the way, and not enough to kill it. And this is kind of a little throttle adjustment screw, and you see how it's tapered there. You screw it in or out, and that'll control how high it's idling. And then you've got these two, which is also helping to control your fuel.
Is that for the rich or lean?
Yep. That'll control how much fuel you're dumping in there, and at high and low. So one of these is going to be a high adjustment, and one of these is going to be a low adjustment. And it looks like this takes a special tool, and usually they will, unfortunately.
Do you just leave it running and adjust those listening for a nice?
Yeah. So for high idle, you give it full throttle, and then what you usually do is you turn it down to where it starts to die, and then I think you get, it's different with every engine and every carburetor, but then you turn it back up to 2 or 3 turns, or it could be even half a turn depending on which one you're working with. And then at low idle, you don't even mess with the trigger. You just, that's low idle, that's where you want it to run. You want it to run smoothly, obviously. You don't want it to sound like it's about to die when you're put your finger off the trigger, but it's also when it's sitting, when it's idling, you don't want it to run super hot either, because you're not getting anything out of your machine. You want it to be able to, you want to find a good balance, because if you end up at low idle, these are designed to, and I'll show you when I get this apart, but they're designed to engage and disengage depending on how much throttle you're giving it. With these it's just centrifugal force, and that engages or disengages your implement. So if you've got it at low idle but it's really high, then it's going to be spinning your head, and you don't want that, because you want to be able to put it down and not worry about throwing a can of brake cleaner off your bench.
You say
So
low idle but really high. As far as high, is it richness?
yeah, well, so you want to, and you can smell it too. Sometimes you can see it out of the muffler if it's running high, rich or lean. It'll smell like, it'll smell like unburnt fuel. Yeah. And you don't want it to, you don't want to flood it, obviously. But like I said, you also don't want it to die out. So it's kind of like you give it a little bit of fuel. That's where you would back it out and then just give it a little more fuel, right? And that'll be usually a good adjustment, but it just depends. And sometimes it can be hard to find the specifications for that. On the other side of this carburetor is a little gasket, and it's really important that if you're taking this stuff apart, you put it back together exactly how it came off, because this gasket actually controls the little fuel pump inside the carburetor that pumps fuel up the carburetor jet. And if you put that gasket on upside down, it'll not start before, when you started taking it apart, but it especially won't start after, because it's got no air going to the fuel pump. And the way that fuel pump works is, as the piston goes up and down, there's a little passage that goes on the underside of the piston inside the combustion chamber, and as the piston drives down, it's pushing air through this tiny little hole into the carburetor, and there's a diaphragm in there. So as the piston drives up and down, it's sucking air in through this passage and pushing air out and it's actually pumping fuel really fast inside this jet, so that every cycle there's air being fired up and ready for the next fire of the piston. Does that make sense? So I'll go ahead and take the rest of this stuff off.
Do you recommend all non-ethanol fuel for small engines?
Yeah, probably.
If you can't get that, use premium.
Yeah, you can use premium. It's probably a little bit overkill, but if that's the only thing you can get, you can run it. Just make sure that whatever you're using the correct combination, the correct ratio of two-cycle oil. And that's another thing too. Fortunately, there are less systems involved with small engines, so you don't have a cooling system, a water cool system. It's just cooled by air, and you also don't have an oil bath for your crankcase, which I'll show you in just a minute. Instead, you use what's called two-cycle oil, and what that's for is to lubricate the walls inside of the combustion chamber with and every other moving component, without actually having to replace the oil, if that makes sense, because the oil is being burned with the gasoline, and it's cleaning it and simultaneously lubricating everything inside of it. So it's really important to, if you're storing it away, to avoid, having oil or gas that might go rancid. So like this is the crankcase. This is where this is where the crankcase is spinning, and there's no oil in there. In your car, there would be oil in there. There's also no main bearings, because the bearing is inside of the piston itself. So that's the little counterweight inside of there. As it turns, it kind of just helps push it back up, push the piston back up. So that's you'll kind of see it a little better once I get it all taken apart. But that's definitely a major difference between large engines and small engines. And it can make things a little more simpler and a little less messy. So I'm just going to keep, these are the centrifugal weights that I was talking about. As it spins, it throws these weights out and it catches on this guy. And this is what this little square piece, actually what a lot of trimmers are, it's just a cable. It's just a cable that's spinning really fast, and on the end of that cable is a little square doodad that fits inside of there. And as these weights throw out, it catches onto this little clutch kind of, and that will engage your trimmer. So I'm just taking these guys off.
Is there a reason to take it apart to this level that you're doing now?
Nope, this is just for your guys' sake, so you can kind of get an idea of how it all goes together. And I would encourage you to start with those two things that I mentioned earlier. The spark plug and the air filter. Make sure you're getting spark, and make sure when I'm diagnosing stuff, I don't even put the air filter on there, because I don't want to rob the engine of anything. I don't want to rob it of any air if that's the issue. I want to make sure that it's running nice and clean. Make sure you're not working in sucking in paint fumes or dust or whatever in your shop when you're running it, obviously. But it helps because it's just like, it's almost like a peace of mind knowing that you've already ruled out one of the issues, right? You already know you're getting air. And it also helps to take that air filter out, because even before I took the carburetor off, I could see kind of where my valve was positioned, my butterfly valves there. So I'll go ahead and just keep taking this apart. But when it comes to getting those second opinions that I was talking about earlier from your shop, one of the other 3 points that I was going to recommend checking, so you've got your air filter and spark plug. The third point that I would probably start with would be the carburetor and then your compression. So even though a gasoline engine doesn't ignite using compression, you still need compression. You still need a chamber in which you can compress air and create the combustion that you need in order to get that piston to fire. And I'm really right now I'm just taking it apart so you guys can see the piston inside there and see how it's moving in and out. I want you to kind of look at how I'm organizing everything here. If you're really diving into something and you think you might be stepping away, for an afternoon or two, probably be a good idea to bag everything up and label it. If I know that I've torn into something several times and I know exactly where the screws and bolts go, I don't usually bag them up, especially if it's just one screw, But in the event that you've got to take out all these screws, which you probably wouldn't if you're just trying to diagnose stuff, but in the event that you do, because you got a quote or you got an opinion from a mower shop telling you that your compression's bad and you want to rebuild the engine, then it's a good practice just so you can actually put it back together. So after I've taken this cover off, it's got my pull cord in there. Once I take that cover off, this little wheel in here, this little flywheel, has that magnet that I was talking about, and it's got several different purposes. The one is these little things here, these little springy deals here. These engage with your pull starter, so this allows you to start your engine, and it's going to be different on every piece of equipment. But for this one, we know that these act as a way to start it and engage with your pull cord. We also know that it's got some weight to it, so it assists the engine once it gets started. There's a reason these are so heavy. They've got a big job, but any sort of balanced weight that you can get helps the engine along once you get it started, because it's not working so hard to try and keep things going in the same rotary motion. The third purpose that this serves is it's obviously got a little squirrel cage look to it. It's a fan, and this riding on here, sitting just like this, or sitting kind of like that, it dissipates heat as it turns. So this guy is turning with the engine and the piston's moving up and down, and it's dissipating heat anywhere that it can through these baffles. And then finally, this is where that magnet is, and this creates that electromagnetic field between what's called the magneto right here and this magnet. And as the engine spins, every cycle it shoots another spark up to the top of the engine, and that is what makes the engine able to sustain itself. Is once you get it started, the whole thing is going to run on its own. And I think that's a really fascinating thing. And the reason, when you start getting this deep, if you ever have to get this deep for whatever reason, you got to replace your magneto or whatever, just make sure that you don't lose any little parts. Be mindful, because this is a little keyway, and it's got a notch in here. This little flywheel has a notch in here that it engages with. So, and that's all it needs in order to stay engaged with the engine. But now this shaft is rotating with it. You can actually feel, I cleaned this up, you can feel the magnet there. Yeah. Yeah. So if you turn that, you can feel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And once you get it started, Once you get it started, obviously it's going and going and going, and you don't have to worry about the spark plug anymore.
How do you test the compression?
So that's a great point. Before you before you get this far, what I would do is, the thing is, if you're gonna buy a compression tester, it's about $50 for a decent one, for one that'll last you probably forever, depending on how much you abuse it. But if you go out and buy a compression tester, how it works is it's basically usually, I mean, anymore I think they're like a braided, it's like a braided wire hose, basically pressure hose, pneumatic hose, and it's got a fitting on the end that you can screw into the spark plug hole, and you don't have to worry about the piston hitting it because it's designed to be able to screw into that spark plug hole. And it's got a little O-ring so you know that it's sealed off. And what you do is you screw it into there, and you're not trying to start it, you're just trying to see if it has compression. You're just trying to see if between here and here, you know, everything is sealed off. And I actually did do a compression test on this one right before I came down, and it's got good pressure. But once you get that threaded into there, you put your gauge on it. Usually it's just got a collar you clip onto the gauge, and then you rip your pull starting, you know, 8 to 10 times. And usually after 3 it's good, but just to make sure, you can do it 8 to 10. And you should see anywhere between 60 and 90 psi. This went up to 90 and it was holding, which is good. You know, that's enough to keep it running. If you don't have compression, or you're only seeing, you know, you're starting to see 50 pounds or even 55 pounds, you're getting kind of low. And some of them are only, some of them are only designed to run at 60 pounds of pressure for compression. But the one, it just depends on your particular machine. And that's for trimmers. You know, mowers are going to be a little different, but that's all you got to do is you just screw it into there and rip the cord a couple times, and if you've got compression, then you're good. You know that your problem probably lies in this guy. I would say probably 90% of the time, probably like $30 to replace it, or you know, you can take it out if you're real careful and you're real clean about it. And if you don't want to wait for a new one, I would recommend just taking off the couple of screws that hold this whole thing together, and then take your carburetor cleaner and put your glasses on, because if there's ever a point in this whole process that you put your glasses on, it's this one. Because you're gonna get in there, yep, and you're gonna put your little spray nozzle in one of the holes, and it's gonna shoot right back in your face, and you only do it once. Yep, keep your mouth closed. If you get it in, you know, on your lips or in your eyes, hopefully you don't get it in your eyes because you're wearing your glasses, but rinse them out. Before you do anything else, you know, rinse your lips, rinse your face, rinse your eyes under cold water for about 15 minutes. If it's still burning, that's usually when you need to see a doctor. But hopefully you never have to experience that. Like I said, you only do it once. So you know you've got compression, you know you're getting spark, you know you're not really robbing it of any fuel or air, then the problem is probably in this guy. Let's say, like I said, probably 90% of the time. So clean it out. Make sure everything, your gaskets are good. This purge bubble is in decent shape. It's not cracked and going to. The thing is, the whole carburetor operates under the principle of vacuum, and it's as the piston goes down, it's sucking more fuel into the combustion chamber. And if there's anywhere on here where it's got a vacuum leak, it's not going to run the way it's supposed to. So make sure everything's in good shape. Your gaskets are in good shape. If you buy a new carburetor, make sure it comes with gaskets. If you think that may be what the issue is, yeah, definitely make sure you get your gaskets. The last thing when it comes to the diagnostic side of things, is it's equally as important that the air can get out as it is to make sure the air can get in. So I would start, if you've tried everything that you could possibly try, it's got a brand new carburetor on it, it's got compression, and it's holding compression, you know, because you can, the thing is, when I say holding compression, is you can rip it and it can get up to pressure, but if it starts going down, then you've got a leak somewhere. And you might be able to get it started, but it might not run the way it's supposed to. So I would probably see if this guy's your culprit. And most pieces of equipment, when it comes to chainsaws and trimmers, every manufacturer has their own style of this little screen here. But this muffler screen is designed so that there's enough back pressure inside the combustion chamber that it doesn't let too much air out. It kind of acts like your catalytic converter or your muffler. There's enough back pressure so that it doesn't end up backfiring or whatever. It runs smoothly the way it's supposed to. But the thing is, it's real small. It's real small grid. It's almost like a net, really. Yeah, yeah, actually it's about just as pliable as that. And the thing is, it's really easy for carbon deposits to get built up in there. So I would take that out and see if there's a chance that is all bunged up, and if it is, all you got to do is you can buy a new one, but just put it in a pair of pliers or a vise, and take a torch and just torch it out. Get it red hot, take some compressed air, blow it out, and it will, I mean, even this has a couple of little things in there that probably could stand to be cleaned up, but just make sure you can see through it. Rinse it out with your carb cleaner or whatever and throw it back on, and hopefully you see some improvement there. These screens, if you look past them, they could be the death of you. I mean, they could drive you crazy, because it's not just, it depends on the manufacturer, like I said, but it isn't just this one. A lot of times there are screens inside your carburetor, and even if you clean your carburetor out, the screens can still build up little deposits that are inside your fuel that you may not be able to get clean with the carburetor cleaner. So just take a really close eye to it. If you need, grab a pair of readers or a magnifying glass. And I did this yesterday. I put this on before putting the cover on. Grab like I said, a pair of readers or a magnifying glass, and look really closely at all the passages inside your carburetor and see if there's a chance any one of those is clogged up with any debris from your fuel. Because it's not uncommon. It really isn't. And I know I've seen guys who own steel pieces of equipment. They've got whole fleets of people running steel trimmers and stuff like that, and blowers, and several times a year they have to take the carburetor off and clean out, because steel they have little screens inside there. They have to take the carburetor out and spray that screen out. So just look and see if there's a chance your carburetor has one of those screens in there, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be really fine deposits that are easy to overlook. Because, you know, if they're in your gas, they're probably not, and if they're making it past your fuel filter, that's another thing too. You've got a fuel filter inside your tank. I would encourage you, I keep forgetting to mention that because I don't have a fuel tank in front of me, but you got a fuel filter inside your tank, and just like everything, you got to be able to get clean fuel into the engine. And so be mindful of your fuel filter. They're usually pretty easy to take out and clean. Remove the tank, dump the gas out somewhere safe, and it'll be banging around in there, right? So sometimes you got to get like a little hook screwdriver, a little pick, and get in there and fish it out. Some of them have a dual filter, so it goes in through the top of the tank, and what that does is I didn't bring it, but the fuel tank usually is like, it sits like this. And if you've got a fuel filter on this side, but not on this side, then there's a chance that you're leaving deposits in here, and you can, the tank will get dirty, and you're increasing the chance of fuel, getting dirty fuel into your combustion chamber. So if you guys are interested, I can go ahead and take this the rest of the way apart, just so we can hold the fun little piston inside there. That's probably,
line sometimes gets a crack in it.
if a line gets a crack in it.
Yeah, so that in the vacuum process, it's sucking too much air with the fuel.
Right, and that'll make it. Are you? What time is it? Is this the?
It's almost 11.
Oh, okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, because I know that the next presenter is he was the primitive fire building guy, right? He wasn't going to be here? Okay. All right, well, for your guys' sake, I'll try and wrap up. Just about got it here. So I'm going to take this and just pull that off. So this is the top end of the engine. This is the combustion chamber. And then this little doodad is the piston. And this is my favorite part, like I said, because it's so tiny and so cute, and it looks like it could break. So.
Did it just pull off? You
Yep.
didn't have it clamped on there?
Nope, I just pulled it off, and it was attached to the crankshaft, so I had to pull the engine head off first, but then I could finagle it out of there. And then you can see actually inside this combustion chamber, if you don't want to get this far, a good tip is to take the muffler off on this side right here, either the muffler or the carburetor end. You'll be able to see directly into the combustion chamber, because one has to bring air in and one has to let air out. And so if you take the muffler off, you can usually see the walls of the piston and the walls of the combustion chamber. And if there's scoring either up and down or side to side, then you know that there could be an issue with your piston rings, which are the tiny little springs on there. And over time they do get worn out, and if you want, you can pass it around. I did my best to clean this stuff up kind of a little bit so that
After replacing the carburetor on my Honda 2000 generator,
Yeah.
it's still running rough. Would that just be the rich and lean?
yeah,
adjustments?
starts right up.
It's hard to start still, but
Okay.
You check the exhaust spring?
I have not.
Yeah, how old is it?
It's old. I bought
Old.
2000.
Okay. Yeah, be a great place to start, the exhaust screen. I'm sure that you probably already looked at the filter, the air filter, so that's good. If I had to guess, it's probably something to do with the mixture of air and fuel. So after you, because the thing is, do you want to take a look at this? Okay. The thing is, when you get everything running the way it's supposed to before you get to the exhaust side of things, it can be really hard to diagnose everything else, if that makes sense. If you're doing everything you can with the carburetor to get it to run right, but you just haven't quite taken the time to look at that that filter, that muffler screen, then there's a chance that you're just not getting the airflow that you need, that you're supposed to have, and that's really valuable. Steel, you can't get anything. You can't get parts diagrams, you can't get service manuals, you can't get operators manuals. They are exclusively for dealerships, and I've gone into a steel dealership and asked for one of those, and they're like, I don't even think that we can get those for you. They're exclusively for steel dealerships.
Husqvarna?
I don't know about Husqvarna, only because where I work, we don't have a Husqvarna dealer. I think the closest is Spokane, and I'm out of the Pullman, Moscow area. There might be one in Moscow, but for whatever reason, it's just the higher ups just like going to get stuff from places where, you know, it's inconvenient for me. But the I would encourage you to get online, see if manuals.lib.com, I think is what it's called, has manuals for everything you can think of. I don't know who exactly runs it, but I've found manuals for stuff I've never even heard of before. Have you guys ever heard of power trim edgers? Have you guys ever heard of Tonica edgers? I mean, stuff like that. Just really weird, bizarre. Ryan sod cutters. I mean, I know Ryan is a pretty well-known brand, but when it comes to trying to find parts and diagrams, manuals that I've had a lot of really good luck with that website. And it's nice because you can pull up the diagram and have it right in front of you, and if you've got your engine torn apart, you can see what you need. You don't have to try and describe it to the person at the dealership. Sometimes that can be a real big pain in the butt. So if you can find a parts diagram and a service manual, you'll get the compression specifications you'll need, you'll get the gap specifications that you need. You'll know the procedure for adjusting that carburetor to the way that it's engineered to be adjusted. So if it's, you know, I mean, most service manuals will tell you exactly how to do it, word, you know, step by step. And I think that's a really valuable resource that sometimes even I forget about. But some manuals aren't as helpful, but Honda's pretty good about it. Honda's pretty good about making their stuff accessible and clear, very user friendly. So I think it's manuals.lib.com. Hang on. Yeah, it's manualslib.com. Yeah, so forget the first dot. It's just manualslib. I mean, yeah, they've got over 5 million products on there, and you can download all of them. You go on go on their website, go to export, you know, and it's safe. I use it all the time at work on the work computers, and so I download it. I save for every piece of equipment that we work with. If I find a manual on there, I'll export it, I'll download it, I'll save it in a, you know, a way that I actually know what it is and can identify it later on. And of course, those are nice to have on your phone or your laptop or your iPad. So if you're out working in the shop, you can still access all that information. You don't have to run back and forth inside or jump on the computer every time that you need information. So,
what is your shop rate now?
So I service all the university's vehicles. So for fleet vehicles and equipment, I'm at like 46 an hour. I'm not making 46 an hour, but that's what we charge for people, you know, per hour to work on their equipment. But when you compare that to outsourcing, it makes a lot more sense for our entity to just hire a mechanic and pay them, you know, whatever an hour, instead of going and taking a Polaris or a Mower or whatever to the dealer and having them spend 3 hours at $140, $150 an hour to do it. That's a third of the price is what we're charging, or a quarter of the price sometimes. So yeah, that's more of an internal thing. That's why it's so cheap, because it's not outsourced. It's all under the same entity. But yeah, do you guys have any other questions, or was there anything that you think that I maybe didn't touch on?
So, with like winter storage,
Yeah.
you know, I know a couple of outfitters that have, you know, 4-stroke outboards, and they say they just use the float plane fuel.
Float plane.
Fuel.
Oh.
and they don't have to do a thing to their engine. They just put them on the rack in the winter,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Well, so are they using that instead of a fuel stabilizer? Is that kind of what they're
I
doing?
think they were just using the straight airplane fuel
Right.
and not stabilizing it.
I guess that makes sense. But those are pretty big, right?
I think they're 20 horse
Yeah.
motors.
Okay. I guess you could do it if you could get your hands on it, if that's what they use. The biggest thing I think would be to make sure you get rid of whatever fuel is in there. Either run it out of fuel or dump the tank and run everything out of the carburetor. And then when you get, put fresh fuel in it, or don't put fuel in it at all, but if you put fresh fuel in it, just put a fuel stabilizer in it. And if you're working with something that has an oil bath inside the crankcase, I would drain the oil so that it's not sitting, so that your engine isn't sitting there soaking in all those carbon deposits all winter long. So it's got fresh oil. And to tell you the truth, neglect is just as hard on small engines and diesels than abusing them. And neglect is, at the end of the day, neglecting your small engines is abusing them. and you're gonna feel it. You're gonna notice the difference.
I'm not very mechanical, and the worst thing is in the springtime when you go to start all, your weed whacker blower and all of that, they just don't want to start.
Mm-hmm.
So I burn premium fuel.
Good.
And in the fall, I put some fuel stabilizer
Perfect.
in and run them dry.
Yeah.
Pour it out. And then in the spring, every spring I do new spark plugs, fuel filters,
Yeah.
change the oil and filters, obviously.
Sure.
And this spring, every one of my pieces of equipment within the second course.
That's a
well worth.
great practice.
Oh, it's just
Great practice.
another
Yep.
person getting blistered between the fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would take those preliminary actions, because you're gonna get out what you put into it at the end of the day. Change your filters, take a look at your spark plugs, try and keep it somewhere that is not going to be freezing, because that's really hard on these metal pieces of equipment, and even the plastic. I mean, this pull starter is plastic, and if that gets brittle and you go to pull it one year, unfortunately, probably have to replace that pull starter. And that's a whole nother thing, I think.
Yeah, those are a real pain.
They can be a pain because in order to come back that fast, you got a lot of spring on there. So if you can, use gloves. Try not to cut your fingers. When you get in there, you'll see what I mean. But that I would say that just running them out of fuel. Seafoam. I was gonna say seafoam is the last thing that I would recommend running through your small engines, because seafoam will. It's tried and true. If you're having fuel issues, carburetor issues at the end of the year, you can put a can of, don't put a whole can in there, but I think it's an ounce per gallon. So put that. You can be a little. The thing is, those engines will run on seafoam alone. So you you can do it by the book, or you can do a little bit extra and get away with it.
So it just cleans the internal stuff.
Yep, it'll clean the walls of this combustion chamber. It'll keep your spark plug from getting oil deposits on it. It'll keep your carburetor clean, and it's cheap too. It's for a small engine application. Running seafoam is cheap, because I think it's like maybe up to $10 a can, maybe $7 or $8 a can, depending on where you get it. I would another thing too. I would recommend going to a place like Wally World to get some of that stuff if you can get it, because the same gallon of oil at Wally World is going to be, and I kid you not, $10 more at O'Reilly's, and O'Reilly's is the cheap end of auto parts. So yeah, if you can get your hands on a can of seafoam, you'll run it all year round, So right on. Cool. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Yep, have a good one.
Well, that's all I have for this video. Bang around that bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos come out. Call us on the hotline if you have comments or questions and want to be featured in an upcoming video. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe. Check us out on the website, and we'll see you guys on the next one.